The Surkhan Valley is the southernmost part of Uzbekistan. The waters of the Great Amudarya, which was once referred to as the Oxus of the rapid Ceyhun. These lands were the most important part of northern Bactria. This was once the area of the largest dynastic centers of the Kushan Empire, one of the greatest states of the ancient world. A land covered with legends, unique Buddhist cave monasteries, and dynastic palaces with Greco-Bactrian Buddhist sculpture and painting. The history of the Kushans is the final stage of the mature, ancient culture of Uzbekistan. And Bactria was the heart of this empire. Bactria was the region with great civilization. This civilization developed since ancient times until it became the first core of the Kushan Empire. Who was at the origins of this civilization that survived a natural disaster in the 2nd century? And why did ancient Alexandria Oxiana, on the archaeological site of Kampırtepe, one of the most prosperous cities at the time, suddenly cease to exist in its heyday during the reign of Kanishka I? It was not easy to find the origins of this civilization. All these world-famous sites of Fayastepe, Karatepe, Kampırtepe, Delverzintepe, and the Halchayan Palace kept the secrets of the history of the Kushans for millennia. More than one generation of outstanding researchers strove to find these secrets. Discovered in the early 20th century, this world has revealed something amazing to mankind. These are the faces of people that belong to the elite of those historical times. The legendary Kajula Katvises, the great king, the son of God, as well as Vima Takto, Vima Katvises, Kanishka, Huvishka, and Vasudeva. Here they are, the visible images of the legendary Kushan kings, under whose rule the Kushan Empire reached its prosperity and became one of the greatest powers in the ancient world, along with the Roman Empire, the Parthian kingdom, and the state of the Han dynasty. These lands once occupied the most important position between the civilizations of the West and the East. The creators of this kingdom, the Yuezhi or Tocharians, came from the depths of Central Asia. In the Far East, the long war between the great Yuezhi and the Huns ends with the victory of the latter, and the Yuezhi migrate through the pass. And as Zhang Huain reports, occupy the Daha country in the upper reaches of the Amudarya. At the time of its greatest power, under King Kanishka, the Kushan kingdom included the territories of present-day Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Afghanistan, as well as part of the Hindustan peninsula. According to Chinese chronicles, after the conquest of India, the Kushan state became one of the most powerful and richest on the continent. The capital was present-day Peshawar. Then it was known as Pataliputra. According to researchers, the Kushan statehood was multi-ethnic. It was a fusion of the material and spiritual culture of different peoples, including the Hellenese, Bactrians, and representatives of the Indian ethnic group. However, in both culture and art, the traces of Hellenic influence are gradually replaced by new trends, Asian and Indian traditions. Numismatic data indicate that the kingdom was founded by a tribe leader named Kajula Katvises. But over time, he became known as the Great King, the King of Kings, and even the Son of God. This is what the legends on the coins say. Kajula began his political career from the position of a tribe leader, Yagbu, which was the title of the supreme ruler at that time. From his name, Kajula, we understand he was of Turkic origin. Kajalu was the name of Timur's ancient great-grandfather, who was friends with Genghis Khan's ancestors. At that time, there was no Mongolia. It was the country of the ancient Turks, Otegen, as it was called then. This is the present-day Ord Plateau, where there was the Ord of Huns, the Ord of ancient Turks. These people founded the large Kushan Empire, but as they did it, they mixed with all the other tribes, Iranian-speaking and other. All Kushan kings minted coins on a large scale. Coins of the Kushan kings, Sotermegas, Vimatakto, Kajula and their descendants, were found throughout northern Bactria, the territory of the Kushan Empire. Coins minted by Kajula were found in large numbers on the territory of Gandhara and Kabulistan. According to researchers, in particular the British numismatist Joe Cribb, the minting of coins of Sotermegas began during the reign of Kajula and continued under Vimatakto. Basically, those were bronze coins. Kanishka's gold coins had a Greek legend on them. Some of the inscriptions tell about the title, Basilius Basilion, King of Kings. About 100 coins minted by Huvishka were found in the northwestern and northeastern parts of ancient Surkhan. According to Alexander Cunningham, a British Orientalist, founder of the Archaeological Survey in India, Kanishka III's coins prevail in northwestern India and Vasudeva's coins in the Kabul Valley. They were found in treasures and individually. There is always a portrait of a ruler on the obverse of Kushan coins. On the reverse, there is a patron deity of this king. These coins allowed us to know the names of 33 Kushan deities. All of them are there, including Umay, the Turkic goddess, Nana, as well as Anahita and Ahura Mazda on later coins. But basically, these are Indian deities. Nana and other deities are already from the Kushan group. The central place is occupied by Buddha and Buddhist characters. Deciphered Bactrian inscriptions and legends on coins suggest that power in the Kushan state was passed from father to son. The throne was succeeded directly. The Kushan Empire featured unique Buddhist monasteries and dynastic palaces with Greco-Bactrian and Buddhist sculptures. The Kushan culture is characterized by an organic fusion of three major cultural traditions, or even four, I would say. These are the local Bactrian culture, the Hellenized culture of India, and the nomadic Kushan culture proper. They merged very fruitfully. Robust architecture, the flourishing of urban culture, the flourishing of trade, science, and art. The main dynastic Kushan temples, majestic and especially revered, are located in Surkhatal and Rabatak, which are the territories of present-day Baghlan province in Afghanistan. They were erected during the reign of Kanishka I and Huvishka and perpetuated the memory of the homeland of the ancestors. Baghlan is connected by direct roads with Hindu Kush and Kabulistan. This is where the story of the Kushan kings begins. An inscription was found on one of the stone slabs in the dynastic temple of Rabatak, where the most famous Kushan king Kanishka gives instructions to create and install statues in honor of his great-grandfather, grandfather, and father. He writes that he built a temple, and in this temple he installed statues of his great-great-great-grandfather, Kajula Katfisis, great-great-grandfather Vima Takto, great-grandfather Vima Katfisis, and so on. He gives the genealogy of all Kushan kings. This fact convinces us that kings needed sculptors and artists, and that they understood the nameless masters emphasize their power. The Mathura Museum in India has preserved monumental sculptures of Kanishka and his father Vima Katfisis. Kanishka made Buddhism an official religion. It was a religion of a global nature. All ethnic groups were declared equal before the laws, before heaven, before earth. It was also a Zoroastrian tradition, when before the truth, before Ahura Mazda, the god of reason, all were also declared equal. For me, as a person living in Japan, it becomes clear that the state religion that first became official in the Kushan kingdom was spread along the Great Silk Road until it reached its destination in Japan. The Kushan Empire was the primary driver for the development of Buddhism, which later flourished not only in Central Asia, but also in the Far East, in China, Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. The first Buddhist object that was discovered on the territory of Central Asia was the Zurmala Tower. Back in 1926, archaeologists identified it as a Buddhist stupa built of 1.2 million bricks. Buddhist art is a vast artistic world, and it is amazing that it developed within the Kushan culture. Looking at these monumental images, you begin to understand that the fates of Buddhism are very closely intertwined with the fates of the Kushan Empire. However, the temples and works of art in northern Bactria of the Kushan period are characterized by a symbiosis of Zoroastrian, Buddhist, and Hellenistic secular characters. The Buddhist monuments, cave and ground temples, and monasteries, Karatepa, Fayastepa, the famous Buddhist sculptures from Airtam, Khalchayan, and Dalverzintepa have been studied thoroughly. Firstly, these are the founders of this expedition, Galina Anatolievna Pugachenkova, together with Mikhail Evgenievich Masson, Eduard Vasilievich RTVELADZE, our dear friend, who worked very successfully for many years. He made a great contribution to the study of Kushan culture. Bahadur Turgunov also made a great contribution. Currently, the most prominent researcher into the Kushan period is Shakir Rasulovich Pidayev, whom I have already mentioned and who has presented most unique finds and made truly good publications. Jangar Ilyasov is also a famous Kushan expert, so this branch occupies a big place in our history and archaeology. Unique artifacts from these archaeological sites adorn the expositions of many museums across the world, such as the Museum of Oriental Arts in Moscow or the Louvre in Paris. The Buddha's head once adorned the monastery of ancient Buddhist monks on Karatepe. The ancient master did not spare gold for the divine face. The complex of monasteries on Karatepe literally abounded with sculptures and household items used by the monks. Now they're stored in major museums in Uzbekistan and Russia. At the turn of the Common Era, a number of grandiose Buddhist cultic structures, cave temples, and monasteries appeared around Old Tarmida, as Termes was called at that time. Ancient Termes. It was a big city, a trade and culture center on the right bank of Amudarya, on the territory of present-day Uzbekistan. For the Kushans, it was the stronghold of the Kushan culture in the north, and there are many ancient Buddhist monuments there. Fayaz Tepe archaeological site. Its overground part has been completely reconstructed. Today, it is practically an open-air museum. Fayaz Tepe was even provided with a water supply system, where water was delivered from aqueducts that stretched for several kilometers. In the fall of 1972, a unique bas-relief image of Buddha sitting under the sacred Bodhi tree surrounded by two monks was found on Fayaz Tepe. It is made of calcareous marble and is dated to the 1st-3rd century AD. Buddha, under Sanghati cloth, is sitting in a meditative pose. The entire composition is enclosed in a pointed arch supported by columns with capitals. The original occupies a place in the permanent exhibition of the State Museum of the History of Uzbekistan. In 2022, this unique sculptural composition from Fayaz Tepe was exhibited at the Louvre. The State Museum of the History of Uzbekistan contains fragments of wall paintings and a large colored sculpture of a bodhisattva, also found on Fayaz Tepe. They are dated from the 1st to the 4th centuries AD.
Fayaz Tepe – это памятник, связанный с
Fayaz Tepe is a monument associated with the emergence of Buddhism, whose value goes far beyond Uzbekistan and the Kushan Empire, an extensive state that occupied a territory from present-day Uzbekistan to northern India. I would say that this monument is of great importance for the history of Buddhism in general and the history of world civilization and world religion. Once a Buddhist temple was built near Fayaz Tepe. This is a reconstruction of an ancient Buddhist temple that stood on this land, and the original floor of this temple has been preserved here. This complex is protected by UNESCO, but the amazing thing is that a unique wall painting was discovered here, and today you will see it for the first time. The painting was created on a clay basis with the help of primer and glue paints. Certainly, the ancient land of Surhan was the center of Buddhism and Buddhist artistic culture. This is confirmed by a number of large archaeological sites and objects. What does this land store? Under the sediments of northern Bactria, it has preserved an entire city, and this is Dalverzin Tepe, a major dynastic center of the Kushan Empire. Once it was filled with activity, now it consists of a huge number of lifeless hills. However, this is a place where a large Kushan dynastic palace, numerous Buddhist temples, and rich residential houses were discovered under the cultural layers. Wonderful sculptures and the famous Dalverzin treasure of 36 kilograms of gold jewelry and ingots were extracted from under this ground. Judging by this treasure, Dalverzin Tepe was an important Buddhist center in the Kushan period. According to researchers, it dates back to the 1st century BCE, early 2nd century AD. It was discovered in 1972 during the excavation of the site by the expedition head archaeologists Bahadur Turgunov and Edward RTVELADZE. It is no less important for science than the famous Oxus treasure stored in the British Museum in London. The discovery of the Dalverzin treasure became a real sensation. The treasure was found under sediments that covered a large residential building with lobby and large ceremonial hall in a jug of 34 centimeters high. The gold ingots with inscriptions in the form of bars and discs, gold necklaces, plaques and bracelets made in the complex and filigree technique of casting, embossing and inlaying with stones testify to the high level of jewelry at that time. Gypsum sculptures were also discovered during the excavation. One of the outstanding works found and studied by the Uzbek art expedition led by Galina Anatolievna Pugachenkova was a sculpture of Buddha dated to the early 3rd century AD. Fragments of bas-relief sculptures from the Buddhist temple on Dalverzin Tepe are dated to the same period. A true masterpiece of Kushan art is the head of a prince found in a Buddhist shrine. Unfortunately, this unique find, a prince's head in a high conical tiara, once decorated with gold plaques, is only a fragment from a figure higher than a human height. Once, this sculpture occupied a central place in the hall, and according to the head of the expedition, Academician Galina Pugachenkova, the majestic statue was the image of the Kushan prince Vasudeva. According to researchers, sculptures on Dalverzin Tepe depict representatives of the single Kushan ruling clan. These are images of the rulers of cities and smaller administrative units. Some fragments found on Dalverzin Tepe are painted pink, red, and black on white pigment. Apparently, the sculptors had creative freedom in depicting secular characters and secondary Buddhist images. The statues of Buddha and Bodhisattvas, on the contrary, were created strictly according to the canons that were formed in the art of Gandhara. The works that we have shown you testify to the high development of sculpture and painting in the Kushan Empire. One of the largest monuments of Kushan culture is the archaeological site of Khalchayan. The grandiosity of the architectural ensemble of Khalchayan can be judged by these stone bases of columns, which are quite numerous on the site. The amazing thing is that they are carved from single stone blocks. This monument also opened unique works of art to the world. The State Museum of Arts of Uzbekistan keeps unique sculptures from the Khalchayan site. The figure of a prince sculpted from clay and painted with ochre is dated from the 1st century BCE to the 1st century AD. It indicates that the ancient sculptor created his work after a specific model. He managed to convey the individual traits of this character in the image of the prince. The figure of a queen is dated to the same period. The bust of a girl with a lute, as well as numerous fragments of sculptures painted with ochre, such as the man's head or satyr's head, also have individual features. The archaeological site of Kampir-Tepe is located 30 kilometers west of Termez on the right bank of Amudarya. Academician Edward RTVELADZE studied Kampir-Tepe for many years. Several cultural layers indicate that the foundation of the site is probably dated to the late 4th century BCE. Academician RTVELADZE proved in his academic works that before the Kushan period, at the time of Alexander the Great's Eastern campaign, was a military dugout for his soldiers. Exploring later layers, the researcher discovered Bactrian manuscripts on Kampır-Tepe. Academician Edward RTVELADZE confidently dates the Bactrian manuscripts to the reign of Kanishka I. It has already been established that the buildings on the Halchayan and Kampır-Tepe sites were destroyed by a strong earthquake and subsequent flood in mid-2nd century AD. As a result of the earthquake, the Oxus changed its course and washed away part of the sites. In its heyday, during the reign of Kanishka, this city suddenly ceased to exist. Big cracks and eroded walls were found on the ancient sites, which were once dynastic temples, sanctuaries, and monasteries. Researchers discovered a strong defensive wall near the village of Derbent. It was built from square mud bricks and rubble stone and was 1.5 kilometers long and 6.5 meters thick. This made it possible to establish that the northern border of the Kushan Empire passed along the Hisar Ridge, a mountain system separating two agricultural oases, Surkhan and Kashkadarya. The northern borders pass through Surkhandarya. Between Sogd and Surkhandarya, this wall in Derbent is well known. It went further across the mountains to include northern India. There was a time when Kanishka captured eastern Turkestan too, but the state mainly included the south of Uzbekistan, the south of Tajikistan, the east of Turkmenistan, the whole of Afghanistan, and much of India. The border walls, fortresses, and fortifications in mountain gorges and at the beginnings of rivers apparently controlled the distribution of water and the crossing of the Oxus. This indicates that the Kushan Empire had a centralized defense system. These are the three belts of defensive structures. One of the largest urban centers in Bactria was the city of Tarmita, Termes. This was a place where trade routes connecting north, south, east, and west intersected. It was an important center for spiritual and cultural interchange. Artifacts stored in the Termes Museum of Archaeology testify to the high level of the development of architecture, sculpture, and painting. The Termes Museum of Archaeology is a unique place. It most clearly shows how most powerful civilizations rose and flourished on the territory of ancient Uzbekistan, replacing each other and as if competing in which of them would create a more advanced and significant culture. Unfortunately, the inexorable time has destroyed them all, bringing them into oblivion, but the legacy has remained. Many of the works displayed at the museum are the result of the work of Uzbek French and Uzbek Japanese archaeological expeditions on the territory of Old Termes. Since this year, I have been the head of an archaeological expedition to Termes. We worked in June and July of this year in the south of Uzbekistan, where we achieved very good results, especially in the history of the Hellenistic period in ancient Bactria. The Department of Islamic Art at the Louvre demonstrates the influence of your culture on the entire East. Archaeological work on the territory of Old Termes began in the middle of the last century. In the course of the research, we found artifacts highly diverse in content, illustrating the distinctive artistic culture of Bactria in the Kushan period. Architectural details, which perform both constructive and decorative functions, occupy a special place among them. so do sculptural compositions testifying to high professional skills in Termes sculptors. The sculptures exhibited in the museum are original and unique. They show how this region in the south of present-day Uzbekistan was not just a sacred place, but was also an economic influence in the ancient world. Ancient Tarmita and its heritage are unique and wrapped in legends. Just think about the names: the Greco-Bactrian kingdom, the great Kushans, the unique Middle Ages. All we have seen today at the Museum of Archaeology in Termes testifies to the high level of culture among the peoples that inhabited Uzbekistan. The gold of Dalverzin, the unforgettable images of Halchayan Palace, monasteries and Buddhist temples, these are stories of sensational discoveries. This is a vast artistic world that took shape inside the Kushan culture, where the faiths of Buddhism intertwined with the faiths of the Kushan Empire. Despite the millennia, wind and rain, the ancient monasteries and dynastic citadels have retained their amazing energy. It seemed as if, in the light of the sunset, a monk was about to come out of the cell and light his candles to worship the great Buddha and the sacred land. This is Cultural Legacy of Uzbekistan in World Collections. Thank you for your attention.